The Unexplained Rundown is pleased to partner with tpublic.com and bring you some fun and fantastical apparel and accessories that are truly out of this world. If you're keen to support the show and see it grow, be sure to check out some of the cool designs in the merch store and grab yourself a bargain. Use the link in the description below.
Or concern you about the unknown and the unidentified flying object?
Oh, yes, we discussed it at every conference that we had with the military, and they never were able to make me a concrete report on.
Do you have anything on the subject, sir?
No, I haven't had anything on the subject, and there's always things like that going on. The flying saucers, and we've had other things, you know.
For years, the world has seen reality distorted, facts manipulated, and truth hidden. But there's even more to the story than anyone has ever suspected. Because no one has been able to see the whole picture. Until now.
Friends, welcome back to another episode of the Unexplained Rundown. It's good to be with you on this Easter Eve. So if you found this channel intentionally, then like me, you're intrigued by the unexplained mysteries of this mortal coil of ours, and you crave to know what's real and what's not. So wherever you're joining from this evening, my fellow Aussies, welcome. Thanks for joining me on your Thursday night. If you're abroad, thank you for joining me at the start of your day, or if you're halfway through. Got a couple of friends that are already here in the chat. So welcome, Jimmy. Always good to see you, my friend. Likewise, Jasmine. Welcome. Thanks for taking some time out of your evening to join. Mark is with us as well. G'day, Mark. Good to see you. And yes, you can absolutely rant as much as you like about Go Fast, Zane. So feel free to spam up the chat with all things Go Fast. We've got the bearded UFO guy, Gaz, is here as well. So thank you for joining, Gaz. And Chili Farm Brisbane, great to be with you all. I really love that there are so many folks that I see on a recurring basis in the chat. So thanks for taking some time out of your evening to join me. Got a few newbies in the room as well. Starfish Troopers podcast, catchy intro. Many thanks for the kudos and thanks for joining from Holland abroad. So good to have you with us. So we've got quite a lot to cover off on, folks, and I always tend to run close to the 3-hour mark on these bloody live streams. So I'll try and keep it limited to the 90-minute mark this evening. So if you need to exit at any point in time, I understand. Feel free. It is the Easter long weekend ahead of us, and you can always watch this on demand if you wish. So the title of this episode is Five Eyes Intelligence Sharing on UAPs, UFOs. So what does that relate to? So let's dive straight on in. And before I do, just a quick shout out again, as always, to my current great Patreon supporters, Jimmy, Jasmine, Clint Feidler. We've got a couple of YouTube members with us as well, Fragfart and new YouTube member Telekinetic. So thank you all for your support above and beyond the standard like, share, subscribe. I really appreciate your support and helping this channel grow. If you're interested to check out the membership options on Patreon or YouTube, the links are in the description below. So feel free to have a look if you're interested to support the show for a couple of dollars each month. So let's jump on in. So let's kick things off with earlier this month. It's actually at the start of the month, on the 1st of the month. My good pal and FOIA extraordinaire, John Greenwald Jr., put an article out on his website, and I'll just pull it up here. There we go. So, you know, those that know John's work, I mean, he's been a fantastic advocate for FOIA for several decades. He's been revealing some great information over the years, not just on the UAP topic, but others as well. But he dropped this FOIA release and corresponding article at the start of this month. So he went for emails that were between the UAP task force of several years ago, the predecessor to, so before AARO, there was for a very short period of time, AIMSOG, and before AIMSOG, there was the UAP task force. And so there is just some introductory commentary in this article that I'll just read for context. John reports newly released documents shed light on communications between the UAP task force and the National Reconnaissance Office, the NRO. The documents are part of a FOIA request filed by the Black Vault on June the 27th of 2021. So it takes a couple of years for some of these FOIA responses to come back, which is very, very frustrating. And John was seeking communications between the NRO and the UAPTF. The request was made following the publication of the 2021 UAP report by the ODNI that came out on the 25th of June of 2021. And the request sought specifically the records that pertain to the input from the National Reconnaissance Office to the UAP task force. The NRO's response dated February 29th of this year indicates that 17 documents were found to be responsive to the request. One document was denied in full and 16 were released in part. The redactions were made under FOIA exemption B1 for properly classified information under Executive Order 13526 Section 1.4G and B3, which is the basis for withholding information exempt from disclosure by statute, specifically 10 USC 424. So basically, I'll let you. I've linked this article in the show notes. So if you do want to have a read of not just John's article in full, but the documents that he was able to secure for release through FOIA, feel free. Basically, I just want to read the last paragraph before we get into this document. Overall, the documents provide limited insight into the nature of the communications between the NRO and the UAPTF due to extensive redactions. The reasons for the redactions are based on national security concerns and the protection of sensitive information related to the functions and personnel of the NRO. But through the redacted lines, there lies pieces of the puzzle to see just how in-depth and classified the UAP research programs truly are. And that could not be further from the truth, because if we have a look now at the documents that John was able to secure for release, and I'll just bring this one up for you. So obviously they had sent John, this is all public information from John's site, so it obviously specifies what John's request was, gives him information about why there were redactions, information was withheld. But the thing that is very interesting, and this is a pretty meaty document, it's 134 pages. I went through this entire document. If we jump down to page 108, there was an email dated the 23rd of April, 2021, with a subject heading of UAPTF info request to NRO, National Reconnaissance Office. Classification was secret. No foreign means no foreign nationals. The email was, my thoughts for the future are the following: leverage redaction enhancement proposal, redacted, feed in redacted for both UATPF redacted, leverage redacted. This is the one that struck my eye. Five Eyes coordination through, and I'd never heard of this word before, this term, square dance, which is UAPTF's security classification guide allows for Five Eyes collaboration. So now, while we don't know if there was in fact collaboration between the Five Eyes during the days of the UAPTF, which was back in 2021, around 2021, I think, through to early 2020. As it was actually probably late 2020 to the end of 2021. So, what degree of coordination collaboration the UAPTF had with the Five Eyes during that period, we don't know. But I found it very interesting that this was referenced in this document, specifically square dance, because I had never come across that before, and I reached out to colleagues of mine, and others had not heard of square dance before as well. So I started doing some digging, and the earliest document that I was able to locate, or before I get into the earliest document, I was able to locate on Square Dance. I did find one that was incredibly helpful because it provided some significant context on what Square Dance is. And there's this 2022 report by the National Academies, Sciences, Engineering, Medicine, titled Improving the Intelligence Community's Leveraging of the Full Science and Technology Ecosystem. Now, I haven't read through this entire document. It's 101 pages. It's pretty meaty. It's pretty complicated. However, there was a hit on Square Dance. And so if I come up to this is page 62, we get to a section titled Existing IC, Intelligence Community, S&T, Science and Technology Cooperation with Five Eyes and Allies. And there is really pretty much an entire paragraph devoted to pretty much Square Dance. It says, the NGA, the National Geospatial Agency, and the National Reconnaissance Office, NRO, represent the United States on the FVEY, that's Five Eyes, Allied System for Geospatial Intelligence, ASG. An MOU, which is a Memorandum of Understanding, an MOU known as Square Dance establishes a valuable framework for collaborative R&D, research and development, and test and evaluation activities among Five Eye partners. And remember, the Five Eyes, that's the United States, Canada, the United Kingdom, Australia, and New Zealand. Activities among Five Eye partners up to top secret and SCI, secure compartmented information, I believe that's the acronym, level. The IC, intelligence community, primarily engages in R&D and test and evaluation cooperation with Five Eyes through Square Dance. Square Dance meets, this is what I found interesting, Square Dance meets bi-monthly to discuss selected topics. And interested members enter into cooperative project arrangements, PAs, and equipment and material transfer arrangements. Through interviews with senior S&T personnel, the study committee learned that NGA has approximately 24 cooperative project arrangements in research and development with Five Eyes members, and that NRO also actively participates in Square Dance activities, including a federated architecture program of small satellites that harden the satellite network. NRO also operates a classified virtual laboratory where technologies can be shared among the Five Eyes. The intelligence community is also establishing an open laboratory that will allow the Five Eyes, academia, and industry to participate. Non-US Five Eyes partners are frequently from foreign defense agencies as opposed to intelligence agencies engaging in R&D. Five Eyes also engages in personal exchanges under Square Dance. The Five Eyes assigns employees to serve at foreign partner research laboratories. Assignments typically span 2 years with the possibility of renewal for a third year. So obviously there's a lot of stuff that's pretty intense to digest, but that's the most comprehensive commentary or really explanation that I've come across to date on Square Dance. So there is clearly an opportunity for cooperation and collaboration across the Five Eyes on those range of activities. And the fact that the UAP task force referenced Square Dance, could there have been some cooperation and coordination with Australia, Canada, UK, New Zealand on the UAP topic? And does that continue? I mean, we know that Australia, New Zealand, Canada all attended the AARO's Five Eyes Forum on UAP back in May of last year. And we know we can conclude with a high degree of confidence that the Australia's Defence Intelligence Organisation was represented at that forum. So is the Five Eyes Forum going to be a recurring theme on an annual cadence? Will there be additional engagement via potentially this Square Dance, these bi-monthly meetings and ongoing engagement? So it's interesting to ponder. And the earliest document, and I will give you a chance to have your questions and comments shown as we go through tonight, folks, because I know I've got quite a bit of stuff to cover off on. But this was the earliest document that, and this is all open source. There's nothing that's classified here. This is all public domain information. This is the earliest document that I've been able to come across that references, and I'll just zoom out for you. This was a slide deck, I believe, from a a presentation that was delivered by a gentleman by the name of Al Schaefer, Acting Assistant Secretary of Defense for Research and Engineering, back in 2013. And if I just do a search on Square, basically we come to this document where it references Square Dance, Five Eyes classified information, but it also happens to reference Five Eyes in another capacity, TTCP. Now, I hadn't heard of that. That's for very broad information exchange. So if you're wondering what TTCP stands for or what it is, because I had absolutely no idea, because I obviously don't work in intelligence or in defense. So I consulted the Oracle. I jumped on Google and I looked for information pertaining to TTCP. And this is what came up. And wouldn't you know it, it's via the Australian Department of Defence, the Defence Science and Technology Group, DSTG, who we now know, following on from the live stream that I did last month and revealed the FOIA, the walkthrough of the FOIA documents we did last month. We know now that the Defence Science and Technology Group is engaged on the UAP topic in an Australian context with the Royal Australian Air Force. And so this is on their website. TTCP, the Technical Cooperation Program, is a collaborative five-nation forum between UK, interesting they use the word forum there, between UK, USA, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. TTCP is DST Group's primary Defence Science Technology Group's primary multilateral program of international science and technology, S&T collaboration, and Australia's most important link to the defence-related laboratories of our partner nations. It provides a forum for the sharing of ideas and the harmonisation of programs. This gives member nations the potential to extend their research and development capabilities at minimal cost to avoid duplication and to improve interoperability. TTCP involves some 1,000 defence scientists from the member countries. DSTG contributes to about 60 specialist areas of technology, and obviously goes into who the partners are. They have a rewards program and so on. So I just found that to be, again, another interesting puzzle piece for Five Eyes broad exchange of information. But Square Dance sounds like it's at the classified level. So what is interesting also about that 2013 document, if I come back to it, is on the very next page, and this is dating back to 2013, there's information on hypersonics. And we know that, the pursuit of hypersonic weaponry, hypersonic missiles, is something that the US is very keen on, along with the other Five Eyes member countries. But there was reference to what is HIFI. It's Hypersonic International Flight Research Experimentation. Again, this is dating back to 2013. Joint program between the Air Force Research Laboratory and the Australian Defence Science and Technology Organisation, or now Defence Science and Technology Group. So when I saw Air Force Research Laboratory, that rang a bell, because for those of you that joined my live stream last month, where we did a walkthrough of the Senate estimates brief on UAP, which is this document that we went through relatively comprehensively, well, you might recall that on, I believe it's just the second page, this bullet point here. Defence Science and Technology Group works with allied scientists and to date has had no collaboration on UAP, nor has there been any indication that collaboration would be of benefit. Specifically, Defence Science and Technology Group collaborates closely with the United States Air Force Research Laboratory through the Air Senior National Representative Forum, who have not placed any priority on collaboration in UAP. Now, this document was effective of October of last year. So I've gone after an updated version of this document because there was a Senate estimates hearing in February of this year. So I've gone after the February version of this document. But what I found interesting, if you're not familiar with the Air Force Research Laboratory, let me just pull up some information about them, because in the annals of mythology or lore on the UAP topic, and their website I've added in the show notes below. So if you want to have a look at their website, you can. I mean, they do some pretty pretty extensive research and experimentation. They throw some serious dollars at the projects that they're working on. Basically, the mission of the Air Force Research Laboratory leads the discovery, development, and integration of affordable warfighting technologies for our air, space, and cyberspace forces. But what's really interesting is have a look where one of their research sites is located. Good old Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which is has a very long history in UFO lore, in ufology. So I just found that to be an interesting tidbit. It's not a conspiracy theory. I just thought it was an interesting connection, that the Defense Science and Technology Group has a connection with the Air Force Research Laboratory, which has a research site at Wright-Patterson in the United States, which we know Mike Turner is a representative for Ohio. So he obviously wants to keep the folks at Wright-Pat happy and keep those dollars getting sent his way for contributions. So let's now just have a look briefly. I just want to scrub through a couple of them, and we'll give you a chance for questions to be shown on screen and comments as we come to the end of these documents. But I just want to show you a couple other documents that I was able to secure as well. Now, this one was, if I just zoom out a little bit for you, this is a Defense Science and Technology Group document, their strategic plan of 2016 to 2020. And what's interesting in this document is this specifically in a section dedicated, that refers to extended and supporting roles. Well, it talks about partnerships. And so obviously the NSID, just to go back to that title, by the way, National Security and Intelligence, Surveillance and Reconnaissance, the acronym is known as ISR Division. So if we come back, partnerships, National Security ISR Division leverages world-leading ISR and national security science and technology through collaboration with industry and with domestic and international research partners. But this is where I found it interesting. So this is an Australian document. This is the Defense Science and Technology Group's document that now specifically references Square Dance. NSID undertakes transformational research and development with Five Eyes partners in geospatial intelligence. And we know that the NGA has provided information or has contributed to all of the reports that have been submitted since June of 2021 in the preliminary assessment through to all of the follow-up reports. They're providing data and measurement and signature intelligence under the Square Dance Memorandum of Understanding. So the fact that there is an agreement, a memorandum of understanding between all Five Eyes members, I find to be very interesting. And that is FOIA-able. So I've gone after that through FOIA. Now, I doubt that I'll actually be able to secure it for release through FOIA, because not long ago, I went after this is a response letter I received. I went after the Memorandum of Understanding between Australia, the United Kingdom, United States. It was at an AUKUS level that pertains to the new deep space advanced radar capability known as DARC. And they knocked me back on that request, citing that they obviously located the Memorandum of Understanding document, but they refused the request on the grounds that the document is considered exempt under Section 33 of the FOIA Act. Documents affecting national security, defense, or international relations can be withheld. So I suspect I'll probably meet a similar fate with going after a Square Dance MOU, and also because it's probably well and truly classified. But again, this is what is great about FOIA. You know, you'll never get all of the answers you want through FOIA, but you can get all these breadcrumbs that can lead to other breadcrumbs of, you know, other larger loaves of bread that are out there. And that's why I advocate strongly for what John Greenwald does with FOIA, because it's one big, you know, asset you can have in your toolkit if you want to exercise your right to information. Obviously, you can ask information of your elected representatives as well, but it is certainly something that I'm still learning. I'm a student of FOIA, so I'm by no means an expert, but I've learned a lot as I go, and I've learned a lot from John as well. So there were a few other documents that I was able to find references to Square Dance as well, and these are some other Australian produced documents. This one was similar to the one you just saw as Partnerships Week in 2016. If I just do, again, there is reference to, you know, Square Dance in terms of partnerships and outreach. If I go to the previous, the next record, you know, it really just repeatedly references Square Dance's international partnership and engagement. And I think there was one. So, I mean, nothing too overly exciting in this particular document, but again, I just found some more references to Square Dance. There was some other documents that I found references to Square Dance as well. And this is an interesting one because this is the Defense Science and Technology Group's capability portfolio. This is of 2017, this particular document. And it's on a page that references intelligence analytics. And it talks about information fusion. Information fusion capabilities are sought after by allied nations. The MSTC, not sure what that acronym is engaged in Five Eyes collaboration through various international programs. And again, we've talked about TTCP already and Square Dance. So again, you've got your more of this information regarding to intelligence analytics and cooperation and collaboration across the Five Eyes via this Square Dance. So it begs the question: well, has and is UAP being discussed across the Five Eyes, courtesy of that Square Dance mechanism, that Square Dance framework? And the fact that the UAP task force have documented that formally in writing and email that John was able to secure for release through FOIA, I suspect it is. This is an updated version of that same capability portfolio. This one is from 2018, and it essentially goes on to say the same thing, information fusion. So it's just a slightly updated version of the document you just saw. And there is one or two others as well. So as we come to the back end of these other ones, this is where it gets interesting, because this next document was one that I came across randomly. And I think it's this one. I'll zoom out for you. It's a naval postgraduate school, Monterey, California, a thesis by a gentleman, Robert H. Manuel, of June 2018. And I just found it interesting that Square Dance was referenced in this thesis document. So if I do my little search, I'll bring you to the section that is of relevance. Actually, let me come up a page or two. I'll start, where do I want to start on? Here's the next one. There was two search results for Square. This is the one. So I'm just going to read this this page out to you from the previous page because it's quite interesting. And this is a thesis document by someone in the United States. I believe it was the United States. Let me just go back to page. Yeah, it was Monterey. It was in California. So someone's obviously done their homework and documented quite a. I haven't read this document in its entirety yet, but I'm very interested to do so outside of this session. So the Royal Australian Air Force created, and this is just for context, #1 radar surveillance unit, largely to operate the Jindalee radar network in 1992. And the Jindalee over-the-horizon radar has come up in discussions pertaining to UAP in October of 2021. Senator Whish-Wilson asked the then Chief of Air Force, Air Marshal Mel Hupfield, about Jindalee over-the-horizon radar. In 2015, the Royal Australian Air Force renamed #1 radar surveillance unit, making it #1 remote sensor unit. The name change reflected the importance that remote sensing had assumed for Australia's defence and the increased emphasis Australia was placing on space situational awareness. The unit has since been headed by a wing commander in the Royal Australian Air Force. This is an 05 position. In 2015, the unit had about 110 assigned personnel, many of whom were dual trained on the use of both the Jindalee over-the-horizon radar and on-space systems. #1 remote sensor unit operates several systems within Australia's space surveillance network and the Australian Mission Processor, which directly downloads overhead persistent infrared information from the US Air Force's space-based infrared system, SBIRS, SBIRS, which I've certainly heard come up in discussion many times. Ashton Forbes being one of them. #1 remote sensor unit is located on Royal Australian Air Force Base Edinburgh. Early in its existence, the base housed the headquarters for the Long Range Weapons Establishment. The base was used almost entirely for activities related to the testing of weapons at Woomera through the 1960s and supported a growing list of activities after that. Now, why is that paragraph important? Because anyone that knows their history on the UAP topic in Australia knows that Woomera in the 50s and 60s in South Australia was home to a top secret facility for defense, the Long Range Weapons Establishment, the LRWE, where in 1967, Australia launched its first satellite into orbit. And I know that because my uncle, my mother's brother, was the project manager of that top secret project called RESAT. And Woomera is also interesting because anyone that's read In Plain Sight, Ross Coulthart's book, knows that there have been numerous sightings and observations of UAP reported in the skies around Woomera in the 1950s and the 1960s. And there was even a dedicated UFO group established in the surrounds, the Woomera region, that documented and recorded a lot of these sightings. So it's just, I found it to be a very interesting connection that was included in this document. It goes on to say, a successor to the Weapons Research Establishment, the Defence Science and Technology Group, which we're talking about, we know is now engaged on UAP in Australian context, currently maintains an office adjacent to RAF Edinburgh. Onto the next page, within its development portfolio, the Defence Science and Technology Group's National Security and Intelligence Surveillance and Reconnaissance Division, the NSID, maintains practically all of the systems that #1 remote sensor unit operates. The National Security and Intelligence Surveillance and Reconnaissance Division is involved in the Square Dance program, in which several space-related government organizations in United States also participate. And then it goes on to another topic of discussion. So very interesting document. I haven't added this document, a link to it in the description as of yet, but I will after this live stream. So if there's anyone interested to read this document, it's a meaty one. It's 123 pages, but I found that was interesting. Again, this was a thesis that someone had put together back in 2018. And there's some interesting and informative information included in that document. Now, let me pull that document up because I'll put it up again. And we're going to get to the end of this segment very quickly because I want to show you a bit hard to see. This gentleman, Gene Elliott. Now, he is referenced twice in this this thesis document. Now, why is the name Gene, and kudos and props to my good friend handled TP Loft 2008, who pointed this out for me. Gene Elliott has been the subject or the target of one of my previous FOIA requests. And it produced a document that was pretty interesting in the sense that, and this is the request that I had made going back, I think it was 2022. This was the request that I had made. When was it? Can't remember the date that I made this request, but it's going back to, in 2022, middle of 2022. And this was the request. I kindly request a copy of all emails and supporting file attachments sent to from BCCC to Gene Elliott, Flight Lieutenant, Staff Officer to Director, Air Defense and Space, and Staff Officer to Director General, Space Domain Review. And it goes on. And I was looking at a specific date range, being the 27th of October of 2021 to the 30th of June of 2022. Now, why do I mention that name? Because now Gene Elliott's obviously a very smart guy. He's done some pretty extensive research that has been referenced, obviously, in a thesis document. It's been referenced elsewhere, which I'll come to in just a moment. This is the documents that I got released when going after Gene Elliott as that FOIA target. Now, it's a pretty meaty document, 67 pages. And the document that's quite interesting, though, is if I come down to page 60. So this is an email that was presumably sent from Gene Elliott to his higher up on the 13th of May, 2022. Now, this was, for context, obviously on the 21st of October of 2021, Senator Whish-Wilson, the Greens senator for Tasmania, he pressed the then Chief of Air Force Air Marshal Mel Hupfield on UAP in Australian context and Senate estimates, and he caught the Air Marshal Mel Hupfield completely off guard with his line of questioning. And Mel Hupfield, it looked like he'd seen a ghost. He was thrown completely under the bus and didn't know that he was going to be asked questions about UAP following the release of ODNI's preliminary assessment back on the 25th of June, 2021. So they were preparing themselves for future Senate estimates by any media reports that there were in Australia and the United States pertaining to UAP. They would obviously document that and think, well, how can we prepare ourselves for future Senate estimates so that if the Air Marshal, Chief of Air Force, gets asked questions again about UAP, he's at least going to be prepared. He'll have some specific set talking points that he can speak to. So the email was, sir, all jokes aside. Now, it doesn't have a previous email chain to this, so that suggests to me that there was a little bit of a piss take been going back and forth on the UAP issue. We don't have a subject heading for this email, which has been cut short. But all jokes aside, I think this might end up causing us some work. This article calls out AUKUS, which is the Australia, the UK, and the US Trilateral Defence Alliance, directly regarding a more collaborative approach to this. And so if I pull up this article, just again for your frame of reference, this article is in the show notes. So if you want to have a look at this article, you certainly can. The article is I've never heard of this publication if it's just online, IFLSCIENCE, first public congressional hearing on UFOs in 50 years set for next week. Here's how to watch. So obviously this was the May hearing that took place in 2022. And it goes on and talks about, obviously, the House subcommittee set to launch its first hearing on UAP in 50 years, yada, yada, yada. It goes on. You can actually watch that hearing in in this article, if you haven't seen that hearing. That was chaired by Andre Carson. And so this is where it gets interesting in this article. So this is why I presume Gene Elliott was flagging it with his higher up. While this announcement actually, let's just go back for some context. Curious onlookers aren't expecting much from this hearing. Obviously, much more from this upcoming hearing either. UAP media believes the hearing won't provide the full disclosure many are hoping for, with much of the juicier content being held back for the classified briefing, because there was a classified and unclassified briefing. Nevertheless, the open and accountable nature of the hearing has been widely celebrated. Who knows, perhaps a few interesting snippets of information might also slip through the cracks. And we know that that was true. The Wilson-Davis memo was brought out in the open by Representative Gallagher. While this announcement is a huge positive step, we are not expecting any bombshell announcements at this early stage. We do hope, however, that it encourages other national governments, such as the UK and Australia, under their AUKUS intelligence sharing partnership, to follow suit and begin open conversations of their own. Dave Partridge, editor of Shadows of Your Mind magazine and a member of UAP Media UK. So the team that's doing some good work over there. So that was really the context behind that email that this Gene Elliott was sending. And this just kind of gives you how unfortunate it is that people in positions of leadership in the Royal Australian Air Force were not then, and probably aren't still now, taking the topic of UAP seriously. Because the response that, again, presumably Gene Elliott got from that email was this. Now redacted to protect the privacy of the individual. I suspect that says Gene. That's Gene. Gene, you're right. It may trigger more UFO-flavored interest. The truth is out there, taking the piss. I'll just need to determine if interest in this sci-fi, science fiction, is ahead of Air Force capability or Defense Space Command lead. Regards. And the topic subject was UAPs. And then there's a follow-up email that was on the 13th, 7:39. This one was shortly thereafter. Sir, this is, I presume, a follow-up email from Gene in response to that. Sir, acknowledge, ACK acknowledged. I know historically we have aimed to push the response off to Air Force, specifically DASA, the Defense Aviation Safety Authority, if the main theme of questioning is about aircraft flight safety, which it certainly is. Similarly, we could aim to push the response to the intelligence community / Air Force if the main theme is national security / advanced technologies / control of the air, which it is. The name is Unidentified Aerial Phenomenon, or phenomena it should be, after all, and the USSF, United States Space Force, isn't the lead US agency for this. And then it redacts under a different exemption. So again, that's just an interesting tidbit, a connection that, Gene Elliott, who's obviously done some good research in these various fields, he was linked to that exchange with a higher up that they're clearly just taking the piss out of the topic, and they just weren't taking it seriously whatsoever. Now, what's also very interesting, and this is why I mentioned this gentleman, Gene Elliott, after I did my very first live stream, which was releasing this first iteration of the Chief of Air Force brief, or the Senate Estimates brief on UAP, where it was revealed that the Royal Australian Air Force had a specific strategic narrative in place, that it had come to the conclusion that UAP were likely to be one of three things: natural or other benign phenomena, sensor errors, or human-made technology, either foreign adversarial systems or our own technology that's been misidentified. Now, granted, that was my first live stream. It was a couple of years ago. I was pretty green in terms of researching and understanding Australia's position on the topic. And there's probably a couple of things that I got wrong in that first live stream. But who decided to comment on that YouTube video and then deleted their comment shortly after? My good mate, Gene Elliott. So on the 8th of July of 2022, shortly after I ran that live stream, he commented, "This is a pretty big stretch you're making. Talk about you making something out of nothing. This is a pretty boring example of an internal defense document." He's referring to the Chief of Air Force brief on UAP that provides talking points if asked, which is exactly true. But I don't think it's insignificant. It was certainly significant for us, the general public, that want to know about our government and the Australian Department of Defence's position on UAP, which clearly represents a national security threat and safety of flight risk because our US ally and Five Eyes partner has told us it has. Why would you make the conclusion that the intelligence community doesn't have classified methods to investigate? Your logic is amazingly flawed. Also, unexplained doesn't equal nefarious actions or even something to be concerned about. You've conveniently left out how often the reports mention lack of data as a reason they are not explained. Well, if there's a lack of data, then more data needs to be collected. Now, currently, the Royal Australian Air Force is basically been saying since 1996, move along, folks, nothing to see here. They haven't completed a formal review of their position on UAP because I've requested that repeatedly through a formal petition, through the House of Representatives, through inquiries with the current Minister for Defence, Richard Michels, through elected representatives, and I know that Senator Whish-Wilson is aware of that as well. And the Royal Australian Air Force has not reviewed its position on UAP since 1996. It stopped investigating UAP since 1996 and is only now starting to engage itself in the conversation following on from the Five Eyes Forum in May of last year. The Defence Science and Technology Group is now engaged on the conversation. The Australian Department of Defence has denied that prior to the Five Eyes Forum on UAP in May of last year, that it had no engagement with the United States on the topic of UAP, which is a direct contradiction to what Ross Coulthart's reporting is. He said that members of the UAP task force had briefed members of the defense attaché based in Washington, D.C., the Australian Embassy. I've never been able to prove that through documentary evidence, but, the Royal Australian Air Force, the Chief of Air Force, Air Marshal Robert Chipman, has said repeatedly in Senate estimates, he's testified that Australia did not engage the United States, nor did the United States engage Australia on the topic of UAP prior to the Five Eyes Forum in May of 2023. So just, again, interesting synchronicity that you have this Gene Elliott who has decided to opine on on one of my first live streams on the very topic of the Royal Australian Air Force's lack of interest and appetite on the topic. So I tried to get a little bit more information on Square Dance. I consulted another oracle, ChatGPT. What is Square Dance in relation to Five Eyes? And this is just to summarize for those that are just joining. Square Dance is a term sometimes used to describe a cooperative surveillance program among the Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance, which includes the United States, United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. It refers to the process of these nations exchanging information and cooperating on surveillance activities to enhance their collective intelligence capabilities. A follow-up question that I threw ChatGPT's way, and there's another app called, I can't remember it, Jimmy might remember the name, that actually gives you some sources, some references when you get a search result. But in this instance, I just did ChatGPT. When did Square Dance originate? Should have said originate, not originated. Originated across the Five Eyes. Square Dance is a cooperative surveillance program across the Five Eyes Alliance, originated in the early 2000s. A follow-up question that I then threw good old ChatGPT's way. Does the United States share UAP data and intelligence to the Five Eyes via Square Dance? We know that they potentially do, but just wanted to get ChatGPT's thoughts. The sharing of UAP data and intelligence within the Five Eyes Alliance via Square Dance hasn't been publicly confirmed. Obviously, it didn't take into consideration this FOIA document that John Greenwald was able to secure. However, given the collaborative nature of intelligence sharing among these nations, it's plausible that such information could be shared if deemed relevant to national security interests. And the fact that you now have greater engagement across the Australian Department of Defence through the Royal Australian Air Force, the Defence Science and Technology Group, as well as the Australian Space Agency, it's not beyond the realm of possibility that there is UAP intelligence sharing via the across the Five Eyes via Square Dance. Which Australian government agency is involved in Square Dance? The Australian government agency involved in the Square Dance surveillance program is the Australian Signals Directorate, ASD, which makes sense if there's signals intelligence being shared, but we can also conclude with a relatively high degree of confidence that the Defence Intelligence Organisation would be involved as well, who have a very, very long history on investigating the UAP topic in Australia. Anyone that knows of Harry Turner knows that his 1971 document that he authored, his minute paper, was for the Joint Intelligence Organisation, which its predecessor was the JIB, the Joint Intelligence Bureau. In 1989, it was renamed Joint Intelligence Organisation, and that was 1969, and then 20 years later, in 1989, it became the Defence Intelligence Organisation, the DIO. And it has, obviously a very long history investigating the topic. So it comes as no surprise that it would be the DIO that's now engaged in conversation with AARO, courtesy of the Five Eyes Forum on UAP, and potential ongoing engagement as well. So Perplexity is the name of the other app. Thank you, Chili Farm Brisbane. It's a good one if you use ChatGPT, but you want some sources and references. It's not a bad one to leverage. So I know there's quite a few comments that have come through. So I just want to give you a chance to have your comments shown. There are a few new folks that are joining as well. Paul MP, always good to see you, my friend. Thank you for taking some time out of your evening to join. Zane's comments from earlier, I wonder if one of those 24 programs is Ross's UAP. I have no idea or any thoughts on that one. Starfish Troopers podcast. Square Dance is 4+1. The +1 is the caller. Square Dance is a pretty cool dance. I did line dancing when I was at university. I studied health science, and for part of my degree, I had to do a course on dance, the history of dance and different dance, and I had to do take a lesson and lead a lesson on line dancing, and there was some square dancing thrown in there as well. Joe Smith, keyword Square Dance on this link shows visits to DST. Very, very good. Thank you for sharing that link, Joe. I really appreciate it. You're joining from X. Thanks for joining. Looks like there's a UK centric article, so I'll certainly have a look at that after this live stream. Zane, Adelaide University Industry, Rain Metal International Square Dance. There was one other document I did find, which was probably not of, it had relation to cube satellites with collaboration between the Australian Department of Defence and Australian universities, or at least one Australian university. So there is some cube satellite projects that are being undertaken that incorporate Square Dance with the US as well. Zane's comments, Gene, if you're watching, how about doing an interview with Grant, mate? I doubt he would probably want to, based on the headaches that I've caused potentially for him in the past with my FOIA requests. But the invitation is open, Gene. If you do want to come on and have a discussion, I would be more than happy to do so. Very true. Thanks, Jimmy. Hit that like button, folks, if you're finding this content of interest and would like to watch more of this kind of content. I try and do a live stream on a monthly basis, or at least when I've got some new information to share with you. Wixie77, good old Gene. There's nothing to see here. Move along, folks. Nothing to see here. It would be excellent to hear what he would have to say now. Very, very true. Australia would have a massive part in all of this, and it now does. Thank you for joining, Zane. Appreciate you taking some time, mate. Thanks. Feel free to catch the rest of this outside of this session. And I think that's all of the comments. So, and yes, thank you, Michael Smith. Do like before you leave. So I know that was quite a lot to take in, folks. Again, all very interesting. Benno is here. Great to see you, Benno. Any idea, I presume, how long the Australian-US alliance of data sharing existed pre-Square Dance regarding UAP? Great question. Not too sure. I know that in 1993, there was a Chief of Air Staff, a CAS brief that was submitted by Brett Biddington, who was an intelligence officer for the Royal Australian Air Force, making some policy change recommendations, basically recommending that the Royal Australian Air Force drop its investigation of UAP because it could not find any compelling or other scientific reason to continue to devote resources to the investigation of UAP. That was in 1993. That was implemented in 1996. That's when RAF wiped its hands clean and hasn't done a Buckley since. If you see a UAP in Australia, the recommendation and suggestion from the Royal Australian Air Force is call the cops or reach out to your local UFO, civilian UFO organization, MUFON, the likes of some of those organizations. So, that was 1996. We don't live in 1996 now. We live in 2024, and a lot of things have happened since then. So let's move off of Square Dance, because I now want to segue into a different topic, and this is where you can share your thoughts, folks, on this if you wish. I'm just going to close down a few browser tabs here so I don't have so many open, and let's get into where is it? I'll just find it here. See if I've got it. I did have it. Where is it? Oh, there we go. Let's get into the report that no one wants to talk about. AARO's historical report on UAP, February 2024. Now, I'm not going to go through, obviously, this because it's been done to death by some great commentators in the UFO community. If you haven't watched Richard Dolan's review of AARO's historical report, and kudos to Jimmy for giving me a heads up on that. It's really interesting. He talks about a lot of the historical, the historical aspect of it, a lot of historical cases. So it is a very interesting look-see if you are keen to look at Richard Dolan's review. But what I found interesting in AARO's report was on page, I think it was 23. No, it wasn't page 20. Oh, that's page 22. Or was it 27? There we go. So on page 26, AARO's report talks about foreign. Now, zoom on in. It's a little bit hard on the eyes there. A little bit too much. There we go. Foreign and academic investigatory efforts. And I'll just read this briefly for those that haven't seen this report. AARO reviewed 7 other UAP investigatory panels and programs sponsored by a US university, the United Kingdom, Canada, and France. Of these efforts, one unofficial report from a Canadian government effort in the early 1950s claimed UFOs were of extraterrestrial origin, and the program director claimed he was in contact with aliens. I believe that's, can't remember his name. It might come to me. This position appeared to reflect the opinion of the director of the effort and was not endorsed or supported by the Canadian government. It also then goes on to Stanford University's Sturrock panel of 1998 found no convincing evidence for the extraterrestrial origin of UFO-UAP. The United Kingdom's Flying Saucer Working Party 1950-1951 concluded that flying saucers did not exist. Canada's Sky Project 2023, so it's actually Sky Project Canada, is currently ongoing, and the program will release its findings in 2024. And I know that Daniel Otis, who does some great reporting out of Canada, will be right on top of that, and will probably be the first to reveal information about that report. So if you don't follow Daniel Otis on X. If you're on X, do, because there's some very interesting stuff that comes from him. And I've shared with him the findings that I came up with Square Dance. So I suspect he's making some inquiries in Canada as well. Canada's Project Second Story, 1952 to 1954, an advisory committee that advised the government, never reached any significant conclusions. Canada's Project, so Canada's, got a history of this topic. Canada's Project Magnet, 1950-1954, was run by the Department of Transport engineer Wilbert B. Smith. Smith assessed that UFOs, this is the gentleman from previous I couldn't think of. Smith assessed that UFOs were of extraterrestrial origin and that they flew by magnetism. Smith believed he was in personal contact with extraterrestrial beings through telepathy. There we go, telepathy, and tensor beams. Smith, in an interview as early as 1961, claimed that in 1952, the United States Air Force lent him a piece of UFO to study. He also claimed it was composed of magnesium orthosilate, however you pronounce that. The Canadian government closed the project, saying that there were no definitive results from the research. Smith admitted that his beliefs concerning UFOs were his alone and not the government's position. And then you have, obviously, the French government, who's done some extensive research on the UAP topic, sponsored 3 comprehensive investigative programs, Groupe d'études and d'information sur les phénomènes aérospatiaux I'm not going to try and pronounce that in French. GEPAN 1977 and 1987, another report 1988-2004, and a new version in 2005. When it dissolved, SERPA concluded that the vast majority of cases possess ordinary explanations, while 28% of its caseload remain unresolved. None of these organizations have found evidence of extraterrestrial visitations to Earth. Now, it failed to reference the Kometka report there, but I think it was Japan, the work that they've done, the Kometka report, that was left off the list. But what was also glaringly absent from that section of AARO's report on foreign and academic investigatory efforts was Australia's history. And I was really quite encouraged to see this tweet from Eric Weinstein, who we all know. This is a tweet, obviously, the days following the release of AARO's report. He goes on to tweet, many of you are asking for my reaction regarding the just released AARO report. There is much to say. I want to think carefully before saying more. I am not unsympathetic to US national security needs. In February of 2023, Joe Rogan invited me for 4 hours onto the world's largest English language program, episode 1945, to describe in detail the mystery of potential US government involvement in UFOs and post-Einsteinian physics during the mysterious golden age of general relativity. It has been seen and discussed by millions as expected. I was thus eager to see how thorough this report, AARO's report, would be by combing it for search strings raised in my research. Now, these are all of the references that Eric Weinstein would like to have seen in AARO's report, but there were absolutely no references. Key physicists from the day and universities. What do we have here? Australian Intelligence 1971 report, not once referenced in AARO's report. Australia and its investigatory efforts, not once report, because Australia has almost as long as a history investigating UAP as the United States does. Point of fact, the Department of Air, which is then turned into the Royal Australian Air Force, I believe that's right, I could be wrong, the Department of Supply, the Joint Intelligence Organization, prior to that, its predecessor, the Joint Intelligence Bureau, all had a hand in investigating UAP in Australia, or what it referred to as UAS, unusual aerial sightings, back then. So what is... So I was thinking along exact same lines as Eric Weinstein the very same day, because I tweeted something similar. The same day I tweeted, why did AARO choose not to review or reference the comprehensive 1971 report by Australian nuclear scientist Harry Turner for the then Joint Intelligence Organization, now Defence Intelligence Organization? And I included a link to that 1971 report. Now, I haven't linked that report in the show notes of this live stream, so if you do follow me on X, or if you don't, my handle's @GrantLavac, you can just pull up this National Archives of Australia document. So interesting that AARO chose to completely ignore Australia's history and investigatory efforts on this topic. Because what is interesting is those that follow Eric Weinstein or the work of Jesse Michels, who did a wonderful documentary on, obviously, with David Grusch, and more recently on T. Townsend Brown. And not long ago, in, I believe it was February, it might have even been earlier this month, Eric Weinstein said this on an interview that he did on a podcast, and I've put it in the show notes, with Chris Williamson. It was on the 20th of February, and the title of it was, "Why Does the Modern World Make No Sense?" This is what Eric Weinstein had to say during that interview. And I'll just put up my, I'm just going to put up my fair use banner here, because we are educating the public and critiquing the content we are sharing. So this is Eric Weinstein's comments in this interview with Chris Williamson.
71 Australian document from the Australian Intelligence Service that has been declassified and made public, which clears up all sorts of mysteries about what was going on with physics in the 1950s and 60s. And it names names. It says that Freeman Dyson, John Archibald Wheeler, Pascal Jordan the Nazi, all of these people were working on anti-gravity. And the only reason to be working on anti-gravity is that there was reason to think that something had gone beyond Einsteinian relativity.
So keep that in mind. Park those comments from Eric Weinstein, because it segues nicely into the research that Jesse Michels did in his recent documentary on T. Townsend Brown, which I've included in the link in the description below. The name of his channel is American Alchemy, and the name of his episode is "The CEI Scientist Who Built UFOs." It was aired on the 23rd of February. And so this is a snippet from that episode.
In 1971, the Australian government's Department of Defence and their Joint Intelligence Organization wrote an assessment of UFOs and whether their government should be investing more resources into the phenomenon. The document writes, "A more astounding decision on the part of the US government was to allocate considerable funds to investigate gravity and a means of controlling gravity. The 6 research centers being established were at the Institute for Advanced Study at Princeton, Indiana University, Purdue University, University of North Carolina, and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology through the Gravity Research Institute. One of these anti-gravity research centers, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, was basically just Agnew Bonson and his Institute for Field Physics. Bonson's chief theoretical physicist was Bryce DeWitt, and his chief experimentalist was Townsend Brown. In fact, Wright Airfield Base, in close coordination with Martin Corporation, had their own division of theoretical physics anti-gravity research, headed up by a guy named Josh Goldberg. Martin Corporation, pre-Lockheed merger, was represented by a mathematician named Lewis Witten.
The reason there was a laboratory at Wright Field was to find out what we were doing and to help us do it, and I got a contract from Wright Field to do it. To do gravity, which I did very happily.
Interesting connection, right, Pat, there again. So again, this 1971 document, which we won't review in this live stream tonight, I want to dedicate a separate show to that if you're not familiar with the work of Harry Turner, which Australian veteran UAP researcher Bill Chalker has done some wonderful work on over the years, researching and reporting on Harry Turner's work. We'll look at Harry Turner's 1971 minute paper for the Joint Intelligence Organization in just a moment. But it's interesting that this report, this minute paper that Harry Turner put together, which was a comprehensive assessment of the United States' efforts to investigate and better understand the extent of and nature of UAP UFOs, from basically Roswell 47 through to the then date of 1971. And Harry Turner's findings were that this sudden boom of research dedicated to anti-gravity was part of this. And there's no reference whatsoever to any of the research or anti-gravity endeavors documented at all in AARO's report. There's no linking of that whatsoever. And interestingly, Jesse Michels goes on to talk about that 1971 Harry Turner report a little later in that episode of American Alchemy, which I'll play now as well.
1971 Australian intelligence document, U.S. Air Force Chief of Staff General Nathan Twining stated that the best brains in the Air Force are working on this problem of unidentified flying objects, trying to solve this riddle. The document adds that General Twining was probably not referring to Project Blue Book. Blue Book was just the public-facing UFO investigations committee. The year is 1960. Residents near Hartford, Connecticut see a greenish fireball in the sky. It makes a loud noise as it comes crashing down to Earth. An observer hears the crash and follows it, going outside to find a shed on fire. Metal debris is found in the vicinity.
The cover story was, oh, it's a Russian satellite that exploded, but that was sort of debunked. Townsend goes to the location in New England somewhere, and he has permission to take the material. Project Blue Book wants it, and by the time they get there, this nobody that no one's ever heard of at that time has disappeared with it.
So Project Blue Book wasn't even able to get its hands on materials that allegedly T. Townsend Brown got his hands on. What it was that he took in his possession, who knows? But again, it's all an interesting, interesting connection that is completely, or interesting side story that is completely left out of AARO's report. And again, I won't go through the 1971 document authored by Harry Turner for the Joint Intelligence Organization. It's publicly available in the National Archives of Australia. It's a pretty significant document. It's 59 pages, and I believe it was Bill Chalker that was able to secure this for release through FOIA a number of years ago. I could be mistaken there, but I believe that's true. It really, the fun stuff starts on page 7. So this is the minute paper that Harry Turner authored, and I covered this briefly, wouldn't say briefly, but to a degree in a Spaces that I did on X not so long ago. And what's interesting, again, it's references Dr. Jacques Vallée, Dr. J. Allen Hynek. It's a very comprehensive document, and so I would encourage you to have a look at it if you're interested, because it does talk quite extensively about the efforts being undertaken, obviously from the Project Sign days through to Project Grudge, but then it also talks about all of this, this scientific effort being done at various universities on anti-gravity research. Now, why is that all linked in with a report on the United States efforts to understand UFOs? Because quite possibly it's all linked. And I'll try and find the page reference where this is where it starts. During 1955, because insufficient staff could be recruited for project resources, recourse was made to an urgent appeal for theoretical physicists and mathematicians from the UK. The 6 gravity research centers being established were at the Institute for Advanced Study, Princeton, New Jersey, Princeton University, University of Indiana, Purdue University Research Foundation, University of North Carolina, and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, through the Roger Babson Gravity Research Institute. It was believed that to make a gravity motor, a gravity differential was required, which necessitated the discovery of an insulator, deflector, or absorber of gravity. By 1955, 485 essays have been written on this subject and awards totaling $10,800 made for original contributions. The scientists involved included Teller, being Edward Teller, of the Oppenheimer days and connection. Teller from the University of California, Oppenheimer himself, and F.J. Dyson of the Institute of Advanced Studies, J.A. Wheeler and Richard Arnowit of Princeton, Vaclav Hlavati of University of Indiana, who had worked with Einstein in Prague, and Stanley Desser. The objective was to control gravity. During 1955, the following firms entered in gravity and or electromagnetic programs, and it lists them. So such an intensive onslaught on the gravity enigma was entirely irrational from the standpoint of conventional science, and can only be rationalized within the context of a firm belief that UFOs were real, and the intelligence behind them knew how to control gravity. The drive to harness this power before the USSR could do so would be a strong incentive for the US government to fully support an anti-gravity program. By 1966, 46 separate projects of this nature were being financially supported, 33 of which were under the supervision of the US Air Force, 33 of the 46 under the US Air Force. Although details of most of these projects have been kept classified, it would appear that generally they have not been successful. Work on gravitational waves by J. Weber and his associates under the United States Air Force Cambridge Research Laboratory jurisdiction has been reported fairly extensively since 1966. So again, really, really interesting, facet, and great. Again, I was very encouraged to see that Eric Weinstein had referenced that in his tweet and his initial reactions to the AARO's report, that it was completely left out, because I haven't seen any of the documents that reference those academic endeavors to understand gravity linked in with the UAP topic. Now, the Twining memo that Jesse Michels referred to, which is documented later in that 1971 minute paper by Harry Turner, is also a very interesting one. And we could do a whole. This is dated September the 23rd, 1947, where it states quite black and white. It is the opinion that the phenomenon reported is something real and not visionary or fictitious. There are objects probably approximating the shape of a disk of such appreciable size as to appear to be as large as man-made aircraft. There is possibility that some of these incidents may be caused by natural phenomena such as meteors. The reported operating characteristics such as extreme rates of climb, maneuverability, particularly in roll, and action which must be considered evasive when sighted or contacted by friendly aircraft and radar, lend belief to the possibility that some of the objects are controlled either manually, automatically, or remotely. They're talking about remote drone activity in 1947. Now, I don't think the drones that we're associating with today, but the fact that they're indicating that it had the potential they were exploring it as remotely operated is fascinating. The apparent common description of the objects is as follows: metallic or light reflecting surface, absent of trail except in a few instances when the object apparently is operating under high performance conditions, circular, this is interesting, circular or elliptical in shape, flat on bottom and domed on top. Several reports of well-kept formation flights varying from 3 to 9 objects, normally no associated sound except in 3 instances a substantial rumbling roar was noted, and so on. It kind of goes on. Again, just a truly fascinating document that, I mean, you kind of sounds like, some of the 5 observables are being hinted at in that document from Twining in 1947. So just, again, interesting to get Eric Weinstein's perspectives there on the AARO report. Let me jump on over, see if there have been some questions that have come through. Mark's comments from earlier. Can you FOIA as to why NASA's cameras keep failing everything? Something of interest comes in, failing whenever something of interest comes into view. I've FOIA'd. NASA's actually pretty good on the FOIA front. They respond relatively quickly, unlike the Office of the Secretary of Defense. They can take several years. Wixie 77, Wilbert Smith was ahead of his time. Mark's comments, NATO did a 4-year study in 1964 saying they found it was E.T. crafts and found at least 5 species were engaging. I'm not aware of that. Report. UAP Aotearoa, Colin, welcome, my friend. Great to see you briefly. Feel free to watch at your leisure. And his parting comments were, so much was left out of the AARO report. It's not a scientific analysis or report. I have a scientific background, and the report is nothing but an embarrassment. There are a lot that share those sentiments, my friend. So let me get rid of my banner. Now, just an interesting tidbit before we get off of AARO altogether is what is interesting is if you go to AARO's social media page, namely X. Let me pull this up here. I'll zoom on out so it's not as close there. I'll get rid of that. There we go. So those that have followed AARO on X, on social media, you'll recall that on the 21st of July of 2022, it made its first official post with a post, part of a thread. It added to that on the same day. Now, after the 21st of July 2022, AARO's X or Twitter account goes completely dark. Nothing, until March the 9th of this year, where it then links its historical report, and the reports that link wasn't even working, so that was a bit of a fail. So they then had to put the link in again via the AARO site, and they've been on a bit of a social media tear ever since then. Posting a week after, saying their historical work continues, posting again almost a week after that. With respect to collaboration with academia and scientific community. And then you have a few days after talking about the classifications that it has. So why is this an interesting tidbit for you? Because, and I'm not saying I'm the direct result of this by any means, but I just found it to be interesting that, let me pull this up here. I had sent an email request, a comment request, to Susan Goff, who's kind of the DOD's press liaison officer or press secretary really on the UAP topic. This is the latest email, but the original email dates back, and I've redacted Susan Goff's email address just to avoid anyone from spamming her, and my own email address, obviously. On the 7th of February, this is when I first emailed Sue Goff. And I wrote, I hope this email finds you well. In his recent op-ed in Scientific American, former AARO director, Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, stated the following: I can assure you, as its former director, that AARO is unwaveringly committed to harnessing science and technology to bring unprecedented clarity to these fascinating, important, and stubborn mysteries, and to do so with maximum transparency. I went on to say in the email, as AARO's commitment to, quote, maximum transparency is not reflected in its official social media engagement to date, refer below to AARO's only 2 posts, and I kind of added screenshots in there for Sue Goff's frame of reference. only 2 posts on X/Twitter since mid-2022. Could you or AARO's leadership kindly comment on the reason for AARO's lack of social media engagement to date and failure to uphold its commitment, should have been, to provide updates and information relative to its examinations of unidentified anomalous phenomena across space, air, and maritime domains? Now, I had to follow up quite a few times with Sue. Follow up, that original email was on the 7th, followed up on the 11th. Where did I get here we go. On the 16th, I got an email from Sue saying, "Hi, Grant, working on a comment for you. Regards, Sue Goff." So I was working on the assumption that she was perhaps engaging AARO to try and get a comment to that question. Do you think I got a response thereafter? I thank Sue for, I appreciated her response and said I'd look forward to her comments in due course. Absolute crickets for about a week, so I followed up on the 22nd of February, asking if she'd secured comment. Then the 27th, do you have a status update? Then on the 1st of March, then on the 5th of March, then on the 8th of March, and then obviously again on the 9th of March, following the release of AARO's report, I sent another one. I hope this follow-up email finds you well. Following the release of AARO's report earlier today, could you kindly provide comment via response to the following additional question? And I think this is a fairly valid question to ask, particularly if AARO is saying it has a commitment to maximum transparency. Given all of AARO's operational and reporting milestones between July 2022 and March 2024, why did AARO not utilize its official X Twitter social media account to provide updates and information to the general public during this window? Your response to this and my previous questions would be greatly appreciated. Do you think I got a response? Nothing. I sent a follow-up on the 13th. I sent a follow-up on the 15th asking for a response just to that latest question that I'd sent. And then nothing on the 18th. And there was one after that, which was I basically said, I'm assuming that your lack of response means that you've had no engagement with AARO. So this is what frustrates me about not just the Australian Department of Defense, but also the US Department of Defense, specifically Sue Goff. If they don't want to comment on something that's not in their interest, that's going to cause them embarrassment or calls them out, holds them accountable for their failings to adhere to their commitment to maximum transparency, they won't. It's a very controlled narrative. And we saw that with the media event. They only invited a select number of media outlets to ask questions at that media event with current acting director Timothy Phillips. So I'm not saying there that it was all because of my nagging of Sue Goff that AARO started posting on X. No doubt they had a social media campaign probably scheduled. So keeping that thought in mind, I've actually gone after a copy of their social media policy and their communication strategy policy document, and any emails from the 1st of February leading up to the release of AARO's historical report to get a sense as to what discussions they're having internally on their official X account. And I want to see if I can get some documentary evidence to confirm whether or not Sue Goff actually even bothered to engage AARO following my initial question. I have suspicions, I have doubts that she even did. So just interesting, side note in terms of, I found it funny that AARO is now tweeting up a storm with using its X account. So what else do we have to? I know I'm going to try and wrap it at the 2-hour mark, folks. So those that need to, and yes, Wixie agrees, 77, very controlled indeed. UAP Altera, you're a dogged chaser of Sue Goff, Grant. Keep going. Telekinetic, and thank you for recently joining on YouTube, my friend. Great to see you in the chat. Episode idea for near future: joint discussion with Danny Sheehan, Chris Coulthart. I think you mean Ross Coulthart there, John Greenwald, Grant Lavac, and Richard being maybe Richard Dolan, not too sure. I would love to do more interviews. It's hard because of the time zone difference and just full-time work and having a young family. So, but I would love to do more interviews down the road. Thank you for your support and kind words there, Wixie77. I will certainly keep on keeping on as best I can. And this is interesting. I won't talk about this much in this episode, but Starfish Troopers podcast. Yes, if you follow, there's a gentleman, elderly gentleman on YouTube. He goes by the YouTube channel of Professor Simon, and he has come into some information that would suggest that SETI has found some rather interesting data signals that are not pulsars, but could be data from an extraterrestrial source. Now, it's still very early days. Professor Simon is saying, well, this is what he's been told, and he's waiting for data to be released and confirmation. But if you are interested to learn more about that, I think it's making the rounds on X. I think Sci-Fi News has probably put out a little snippet. But Professor Simon is his name on YouTube. Have a look. He's done two-part episodes that are relatively brief. You can have a look. My good pal Akashi Chris, welcome. Thanks for joining. Start of your day on X, my friend. Always good to see you. Do follow the good work that Akashi Chris does over at Mindforked. She has some really fun and entertaining conversations and content that she talks about. So give her a follow if you're new to Mindforked over there on YouTube. So let's now segue and talk about something else that happened only recently, and this is, I'll just pull up I've refrained from doing slides now because it was just too much work to kind of prepare all these. So this was the one that I wanted to, and you don't need to adjust your camera, folks. I am a little bit flushed in the face. It's a bit warm in my basement office here. Not that basement office, but my basement office. So let's pull this up. So something pretty historic happened only recently. UAP was formally discussed in European Parliament. Francisco Guerrero was the chair of this particular committee or hearing, and it was all documented on YouTube. So you feel free to. I believe I've put the link. I've put the link to this whole UAP discussion in European Parliament in the show notes. I believe I have. I'll just double check. Yes, I have. So this was on the 21st of March, and obviously that's Francisco there in the chair position, and you can see Ryan Graves. Image. He was joining remotely to address some questions and obviously make a presentation. So let me show you what I found to be some of the rather interesting talking points and questions that were discussed during that hearing. And I'll just pull these up now. Here we go. This is the first one. Here we go.
Yeah, please.
Thank you. My name is Lee Dines, and I'm the European Advisor for the Scientific Coalition of UAP Studies. The SEU is a think tank consisting of scientists, engineers, and other professionals who dispassionately research UAP. SEU has over 250 members, many from European countries, and approximately 90 of our members have PhD degrees. My question is to Christian. Christian, what steps specifically can be taken with the aviation community to encourage pilots to report UAP sightings without fear of ridicule or professional repercussions, ultimately fostering a safer environment for data collection and analysis?
I think first of all there should be a form or a way, or maybe an app where pilots, professional observers can submit their sightings, including all the data that they can provide, altitude, location, duration, you name it. And besides there should be a central point for collecting that data and analyzing it, maybe in reference to other sightings, known sightings, or even space and weather phenomena. And I think the only way to do that is by basically build up a centralized database organization to collect the data. And I think in the EU it makes sense to centralize this on a European scale. There are some initiatives locally for different nationalities or different nations to collect the data, but I think this should be a European database. And I think this European database in time can be maybe compared to US database as well, or other bigger organizations, so you don't have all this splintering of all the data being gathered. I think that's the best way to go.
And that is precisely what should also be done in Australia. The Civil Aviation Safety Authority should be doing exactly that, because currently there are no reporting or recording protocols whatsoever for general aviation pilots, commercial, so civil aviation pilots, Air Services Australia, who look after all of the air traffic control, around the country. They don't have any reporting or recording protocols in place for UAP. Neither does the Australian Department of Defence via the Defence Aviation Safety Authority. So at the moment, Australia is sitting on a big donut. We have absolutely no reporting or recording protocols in place whatsoever for pilots and aviators to submit a report of UAP if they happen to observe one, if they happen to have a near miss or take evasive maneuvers and so on. And why it's a concern is, I've said this before, that Ross Coulthart has had people in his house sit down in his living room, whether they're current or former F-35 pilots, that are telling him, look, I'm seeing UAP in Australian airspace, and I can't reconcile what it is I'm seeing. And when Ross asks them, well, are you prepared to report that to your higher ups in Defence and the Royal Australian Air Force? And they're saying they won't, because the message that they're hearing loud and clear from the current Royal Australian Air Force Chief of Air Force Air Marshal Robert Chipman is that, move along, folks, there's nothing to see here. UAP is an American problem, which of course is bullshit, because the US have said it's a global issue. It represents a national security threat and a safety of flight risk. So why on earth would an F-35 pilot or a civil or general aviation pilot in Australia want to come forward and report an observation they have of UAP when, one, there's no mechanism to report it in the first place, two, there's still the air of stigma and ridicule that's associated with the topic, and if they did report it, what would happen with their report? It wouldn't go anywhere. There's no mechanism, there's no investigatory body in place that would do anything with that report. And that's why I think it's really exciting to see what has been proposed. The legislation has been proposed in the United States, the civilian UAP reporting legislation that's been endorsed by Ryan Graves' organization, Americans for Safer Aerospace, or for Safe Aerospace. So if that passes, and you then have civil aviators, civil aviation pilots, not just pilots, but personnel, flight attendants, if they see a UAP, they have to then report it to the FAA. So there is a formal mechanism in place, because that's the real national security risk. If pilots are seeing things that they can't reconcile in their airspace, that are doing things that look like they're defying the known laws of physics or outperform our current performance envelopes, is the term that defense like to use, them not reporting that's the real national security threat. Because what if it was a foreign adversarial system, Russia or China? Or what if it was something that was in that catch-all other bin, that's something maybe more fantastical to think about, that obviously the catch-all other bin was documented in the ODNI's preliminary assessment on UAP in June of 2021. Now, AARO is saying, oh no, move along, folks, nothing to see here. It's all misidentification. It's all natural or other benign phenomena. or it's all BS. People are making shit up, basically. And I have a lot of issues with AARO's report. Again, there are some other great commentators that you can hear what they have to say. As I mentioned, Richard Dolan is one, and Ross Coulthart has spoken at length on Need to Know and his new podcast Reality Check with News Nation as well. So that was an interesting exchange. I thought something that certainly the CASA, Civil Aviation Safety Authority, should take note of as UAP develops more traction and the conversation continues to advance in the United States. This was another interesting exchange at the in European Parliament on UAP. So let me play this one for you now.
Hi, I'm Peter Skafish with the Soul Foundation. I'm the executive director. I'm a cultural anthropologist as well. I have a question for everyone on the panel. We have a lot of activity, as we've noted today, on UAP taking place in the United States, but we found it difficult because of the amount of energy we devote to the topic there with limited resources to build bridges to Europe. So what could the U.S. government do to help all of you on the one hand, and what could civil society organizations like ours do as well, in the way of collaboration on data sharing, policy building, and even diplomatic and interparliamentary activity?
Well, I would say that first, these political discussions are very relevant for us to kind of decrease the stigma surrounding this topic. Also presenting the speakers that have very scientific and concrete experience and positions and presentations is also, I think, a very important step. And then afterwards is just a political will. If you have the political will and you have players in both sides, you can go through very institutions, you can go by parliamentary events, because we know that there's a bipartisan push on the US. Here, we still don't have that political will, but imagine that we have in the next mandate. There then can be like a coalition of efforts to try to push this topic to another level. So again, for me, and I've been here for 5 years, it's more a political will, and then you'll find the tools to arrive to those cooperations. There are, I think, would be gradual. So as we saw, first events, then the exchange of experience, then people get together, then they analyze what can be done, and step by step, we approach this topic in a very scientific and open manner.
So really great to see Peter Skafish from the Soul Foundation attending that European parliamentary discussion, because I've been very interested in one of the key focus of the Soul Foundation's mission from day one is that they want to help other nations around the globe, not just the US, but they want to help other nations with policy recommendations, policy creation, policy implementation. So wonderful to see Peter Skafish asking that question. And the response there from Francisco really rings true for Australia. I think where we're failing at the moment is there's a lack of political will. We still have only one Australian senator, Senator Peter Whish-Wilson, that's been actively engaged on this topic and asking questions within government. No one else has been backing him up or asking questions off of their own back. He's been doing all of the, no one's helping him carry the water, sadly. So there isn't that political will at the moment. If the EU starts to get some traction on the UAP topic and there is a political will and they start implementing policies and procedures for reporting, scientific study, academic research endeavors, I think that is going to make it even harder for countries like the United Kingdom and Australia to keep their heads buried in the sand. So I hope that the efforts of Francisco and those that he's working with and the likes of Ryan Graves and the Soul Foundation can move the needle for the EU to get them to implement some reporting and recording mechanisms, education for their pilots, and so on. And I think that hopefully will you would see Australia and the UK saying, and New Zealand as well, saying, oh, we better get off our ass and maybe take this a little bit more seriously than we have thus far. So interesting exchange there. The last one I wanted to show you includes Ryan Graves. So let me play that for you now.
Ryan from Gulam Sentinel News. He's asking, are you satisfied with AARO's latest reports, and are you happy with the aftermath of that report in the media? Ryan, to you.
Sure, I'll take that one. Well, generally speaking, no, I'm not satisfied with the historical report that was released by the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office as of late. Now, I won't pretend to be a historian of the UAP topic going back to the 40s or earlier. However, one thing was clear is that the language and the dismissal that was inherent within that report did not align with the Joint Chiefs of Staff recommendations for reporting UAPs that went out to all service branches. And in that reporting, they were very clear that this was a serious issue that was occurring internationally as well as domestically, and was a concern both for aviation safety and for our domain awareness. So I think that the report did focus on a few key areas, and they chose what they elected to speak about. But I think that the precedent of caring about this from a defense perspective is ongoing now and more important part of the conversation. So to answer the second part of that question is I would hope that the press would be more engaged in the national security angle of this than the little green man side of the conversation.
So very interesting comments from Ryan Graves there. He talks about the joint staff document, and we're going to get into this now briefly, that Douglas Dean Johnson was able to secure for release through FOIA. Again, a couple of comments that have come through. Mindfork, thanks so much for your comments. Lovely. I really appreciate your support. Thank you for your suggestion, Mark. Can certainly try. I know Ross is a very hard man to track down. I haven't had an engagement with Richard, but I do appreciate the work that both of them do. Thank you for your kind words and comments, Pietro. Really do appreciate it. Wixie77, Ryan Graves is a modern day legend for what he has and is doing for pilots around the world and UAP globally. I certainly take my hat off for Ryan and applaud his efforts to really elevate the conversation from a safety of flight risk, because I think he's really spearheaded the effort. He's done a great job. Mark goes on to say, yes, Ross Coulthart, sorry for the typo before, a collaboration episode would be great if UAP make our own Five Eyes joint movement to bolster global public pressure. Yeah, so to the comments that were made in that last one, I said lack of political will, because there's only one senator that's been taking this topic seriously at the moment, and that's Senator Whish-Wilson. I know I sound like a broken record, but I've said it time and time again. If this topic is one that you take seriously and want your elected representative to take it seriously as well, engage them. Write a letter to your member of parliament or your senator. Give them a call. Send them an email. Tweet at them. Send them a Facebook message. I have, to your question, Chili Farm Brisbane, I've reached out to more politicians than I can probably count on several hands worth. 90% of them don't even bother to get back to me. Written letter, follow-up email, phone call. I've tried tweeting, all of the tricks. It's a game of persistent consistence, or is it consistent persistence? One or the other. If you're persistent consistently, you may have some engagement. So I've had one or two that have replied and said, yes, we do support Green Senator Whish-Wilson's efforts, but we're not prepared to take any action on our own accord. I have reached out to a lot of the defense, the Senate estimates and the House Representative committees related to defense, because they're the ones that are asking the questions of those in positions of leadership in defense of national security related issues, because I have always positioned UAP as a national security threat and safety of flight risk. They're the folks that I've gone after specifically. So, but yes, if you want to engage your elected representative, please do. The more people that do so, I think, like in the US, it's obviously made some form of impact, having senators and elected representatives hear from their constituents on topics that they take seriously. Thank you, Mindful. Yes, do hit that like button if you are finding this content of interest. So let's now, I want to transition to, following on from what Ryan was saying there was Douglas Dean Johnson, who's doing some wonderful work, reporting on what's happening in Congress. He put out a tweet only recently, and let me just show you. This is it. So I'll just pull this up for you. I just want to cover off on this briefly. So this was D. Dean Johnson. Do give him a follow if you're interested to learn what is going on in the US Congress, because he is all over it. There seems to be a lot of confusion about such matters as the recently revealed worldwide military UAP reporting procedures, the scope of AARO's access authorities, protections for potential witnesses, etc. I hope this helps. So there's a link in this tweet, and it takes you to an article that D. Dean Johnson has done on his blog site from on March 26th, and it kind of talks about this document that he was able to secure for release through FOIA. He requested it in May of last year, and he got it, May of last year. He got it only recently, and it's titled "Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena Reporting and Material Disposition, GEN Admin." So I won't read through this report. It's linked. There's a link to this article in the show notes. If you want to have a read through it, do feel free. It talks about obviously the context behind this document, and how it came about that he was able to, why he requested it, how he's able to secure it for release, and so on. But let me show you the document in question, because it is a very interesting one. This is the FOIA response letter that he received, and I'll take you to it's page 4. Because what was alerted to me by, not page 4, where is it? Sorry, I think it's page 4. Page 4 of the, there's page 2, page 3, we'll come to page 4. So on page 4, now I have to give a kudos to my good friend on X, Twitter, TP Loft 2008. He flagged this for me under section 3.8.4.b. It reads this. It's a little hard to see, so let me zoom on in for you. Hopefully that's a bit easier. There we go. Now this is a worldwide instruction, right? It's a worldwide instruction that's gone out to joint staff across the services, Army, Navy, Space Command, Air Force, so on. A UAP incursion is any UAP incident in, on, or near U.S. military installations, operating areas, training areas, special use airspace, proximity operations, and or other areas of interest. Other areas of interest include, but are not limited to, U.S. critical infrastructure and national defense equities of allied military and intelligence coalitions, e.g., Five Eyes, United States, Canada, Australia, United Kingdom, New Zealand. Now, what's interesting, and this is where, again, I have to take my hat off to ex-user TP Loft 2008, who flagged that this has implications because there are several sovereign and joint assets within Australia that would be impacted by this instruction. There's the potential there for Australian impact or consideration, because what are we talking about when we say limited to U.S. allied military and installation coalitions? Well, what is and let me use this as a chance to jump to. So what is one of the joint Australia-US military installations in Australia that I've talked about repeatedly on this show? Pine Gap in the Northern Territory. And we know that from Ross Coulthart's book, In Plain Sight, there have been sightings, observations of UAP above and around Pine Gap for quite some time. And he has had members, former and or current members of the Defence Services come to him and say they are seeing these things above Pine Gap. Now, Pine Gap I've covered in previous episodes, not extensively, but we touched on it on a recent live stream. And I did talk about this document in a recent live stream from the Nautilus Institute, talking about the establishment of the joint Australia-United States relay ground station at Pine Gap. So Pine Gap is operated by US personnel and Australian defence personnel. Now, what role Australian defence personnel have at Pine Gap is unknown, but we know that there are US personnel, CIA, NSA, the Defence Services. So this instruction that's gone out, those services are going to have to formally report on UAP within a fixed time limit if they, if any observations or incursions of UAP meet the criteria that's in that GEN admin document. And what's interesting, another interesting synchronicity in this document, well, who have we talked about previously this evening? Who's referenced in the endnotes? My good mate, Gene Elliott. He's referenced in this particular article, not once, but twice. And obviously the research that he's done, satellite monitoring system comes online in September, Joint Force tracking items orbiting Earth, that was in 2015. And satellite monitoring system comes online in September. That was, when was that? It was May 2015 as well. So he's referenced in the endnotes on 2 occasions. And we've talked about Gene Elliott already earlier in tonight's live stream. So that was just an interesting tidbit. So if personnel that are employed at Pine Gap, if there are observations of UAP, they have to report it. It has to be reported. And for those that are interested to learn a bit more about Pine Gap, there was a very cool, let me just pull it up for you. Someone alerted me to this not so long ago, and I found it to be very interesting. Here you go. So there is a YouTube channel called Boy Boy, and they recently put out a really entertaining and informative educational video on basically their adventures trying to get in to Pine Gap, pretending to be employees at Pine Gap and trying to talk their way in there. So basically their video is, what happens when a group of Aussie YouTubers try and talk their way into Pine Gap. And I'll play the preview for you of the start of their episode. So if it whets your appetite, you can watch it at your leisure. There is a link to it in the description below. So do feel free to give it a watch if you're interested. And I'll just play this for you briefly. There we go. It's very funny and it's very educational too. It gives you quite a lot of an introduction to Pine Gap.
So last month, we were on a flight with fellow Aussie YouTuber Friendly Geordies. Just a completely normal domestic flight, just regular old takeoff, and you have the landing, nothing out of the ordinary. I mean, until we were, pulled off the plane by federal police.
If you are on board, just make your way forward to the front of the cabin.
Yeah, that's awesome. How many cups do you
Yeah, fine. I just wanted to have a chat to you in relation to an incident where you guys were up at Pine Gap.
A remote Pine Gap spy station,
a collection of domes in the desert, a place very few Australians know much about at all.
The most powerful American intelligence facility outside of the United States.
No, close the gate, close it. No, stop.
So it was, turn that off. There we go. Very, very, very entertaining video. So it doesn't go for too long, but a group of Aussie larrikins trying to talk their way into Pine Gap. Very, very funny and informative as well. So, and Jimmy raises a good point. No Australian elected politician has ever entered Pine Gap, which is ridiculous that, the Australian government knows next to nothing about what goes on in Pine Gap. Mindful Pine Gap will have to go down that rabbit hole. It is definitely an interesting rabbit hole indeed. There is, and to Wixie77, go camping out near Pine Gap and Mount Zeal. We talked about Mount Zeal. It was covered in a really good episode from the Y-Files not long ago. Some fascinating stories coming out of Mount Zeal. So I want to come to the back end, folks, because I know that we've covered a hell of a lot of stuff, and I do always end up talking for so much longer than I do. But I do want to call your attention to, this was something that I found really fascinating and obviously close to home. Let me just pull it up for you. So we know that in November of last year, the Sol Foundation had its inaugural symposium, and last month, Dr. Gary Nolan was able to get all of the presentations that were recorded on video up on the Sol Foundation's YouTube channel. And one of the presentations that I found most fascinating, that I actually enjoyed the most, was that of Kevin Knuth. He did a really wonderful presentation, The Physics of UAP, with some clues about their detection, monitoring, and engineering. And so I want to play for you a very short snippet from Kevin Knuth's presentation, because it is of particular relevance and interest to those of us close to home. So let me play this for you briefly.
I talked to veteran David Barnett from New Zealand. He was a sonar operator on the HMNS MZS New Zealand, Southland in New Zealand in November of 1986. This is when JAL Airlines happened, right? I just realized this. In February, so they were performing exercises where they would leave out of Auckland, head out of the Hauraki Gulf into the Pacific Ocean, and then turn around and come back in, and they were to turn on their sonars to see if they were being followed by unidentified submerged objects. And they were followed. They would do this several times a day for weeks, and many times they were followed back in, usually by one or two small USOs that did not have propeller wash, so they couldn't identify what they were. And as they got back into the Gulf, the USOs would usually take off. In one occasion in February, they were followed by a large USO which beamed about 150 feet wide. And when they finally made a sharp turn where they had to bank at about 45 degrees at 20 some knots, they were able to get a view from it from the side, and it was 800 feet long. It's about 30% longer than a Typhoon class submarine. This is a big craft, and it was following them, and it did not break away once they got to the Hauraki Gulf. So they maintained top speed. They made some more turns to try to shake it, And when they did this, the 800-foot USO closed the distance of 20 kilometers. It was 20 kilometers behind them. It closed that distance in about 30 seconds, went under their ship, and killed all the power. The ship lost power, the batteries drained. They were basically adrift and couldn't call for help. And they had to wait for 4 hours before they could wave down a fishing boat to be able to call for help and be rescued. You can estimate the minimum speed of the USO underwater. The minimum speed is around 1,500 miles an hour. That would assume that you immediately accelerate to 1,500 miles an hour and then cruise under the ship. The minimum acceleration, though, would be one where you accelerate at a minimum rate of 4.5 Gs underwater, but reaching a top speed of about almost 3,000 miles an hour. These things are very strange, and it's really bizarre because just like UFOs don't seem to interact with air, this thing didn't seem to be worried about any water resistance. However, the sonar still worked. And sonar works by a pressure wave hitting the craft and bouncing off. So if a pressure wave can interact with the craft, why isn't the craft seem to be interacting with the water when it's moving? Maybe we're not understanding how they're moving at all, and we've got some work to do here.
Man, what a fascinating case. When I was absolutely glued to my screen when I was watching that for the first time, a truly riveting case. And if you haven't watched Kevin Knuth's presentation, I would encourage you to do so. Fascinating, just fascinating commentary and content that he puts out there, and very easy. The way in which he presents it is very easy to digest. Obviously, he has a physics background, so there's a lot of some technical stuff that he talks through, but he does present it in a way that is quite palatable and easy to digest and understand. That is one particular case that I would love to learn so much more about, and I have to take my hat off to two folks, two good gents from across the pond in New Zealand that have tried to secure additional information about that particular incident. The first comes from Colin, my good friend who goes by the handle UAP AARO, who was in the chat earlier tonight. On the 1st of March, he submitted a request for information to the New Zealand Ministry of Defence, specifically pertaining to HMN ZS Southland between 1st of February and 31 March 1987. Specifically, he went after a copy of the deck logs and a copy of all radio transmissions. Now, unfortunately, they said in their letter, the Ministry of Defence is a civilian agency that is responsible for the development of defence policy. Your ministry would not hold the sort of information that you are looking for. So, he made a comparable request. So no cigar with the obviously the Ministry of Defence, but he also tried his luck with the New Zealand Defence Force. And again, I take my hat off to Colin for taking it upon himself, exercising his right to information in New Zealand, and trying to get answers to questions that he and so many others have about that particular incident. 18th of March, he received a response to his email that he sent on the 24th of February, requesting that information, the deck logs, radio transmissions. And this is really where the bummer is, because such a long period of time has passed. The New Zealand Defence Force no longer holds operational information regarding HMN ZS Southland. All surviving records are now held at Archives New Zealand. Many are open access and some are restricted access. Your request is therefore declined in accordance with the appropriate section. So at least Colin has another avenue that he can approach with Archives New Zealand potentially, but disappointing to know that there is no way that New Zealand Defence Force is able to provide any records. Kudos also to another Kiwi, Nick Hudson, who put in an OIA, Office of Information Act, an OIA request, comparable with a FOIA request. He had sent them an email on the 13th of February. He got a response letter on the 11th of March. Again, basically asking for information pertaining to that particular event. And sadly, no cigar for Nick on that front. He had another crack as well with the Government Communications Security Bureau. The 12th of March, he submitted an Official Information Act request on the 17th of February. He asked for, may I please get any and all radio and radar information regarding the February-March 1987 Hauraki Gulf exercises involving HMN Zia Southland and the unknown submersible object they were out to attract, which also followed and then approached and got beneath the Southland. Response: a search of our records identified no information held by GCSB in scope of either part of your request. So it was refused. So again, take my hat off and kudos to those guys for taking it upon themselves to try and get some answers. And this is hopefully what these sorts of presentations from folks that spoke at the Sol Foundation, whether it be my live streams that I do, if it motivates you to get off your backside and exercise your right to information and try and find answers to questions that you have, then I would support and encourage your efforts. And if I can assist you in any way, I know I've had engagement with both Colin and Nick on a number of occasions now. If you ever are interested to submit an OIA or a FOIA request and you need some guidance or just a couple tips and tricks, happy to lend you my perspectives from what I've learned thus far. And I've learned from the greats like John Greenwald Jr. and what he's been doing as well. So just a very, very, take my hat off to those guys for taking it upon themselves. Now, we want to come to the back end here and just come up on some of your comments. So let's see, we had, Jasmine, you've done it again. Oh, thank you, my friend. That's so very, very generous of you. I certainly will be enjoying maybe one beer and some chocolate Easter eggs for my 4-year-old daughter. She will very much enjoy her sugar intake over the next few days. So thank you so very much, Jasmine. That's so greatly appreciated. You're already a patron. You don't have to support further, but it is not expected, but so greatly appreciated. So thank you so very much for your ongoing support of the show. And Akashi Chris, super sticker $3.99. Thank you, my friend. So not needed, but I really appreciate your support as well. I know I'm probably at the top of the start of your day over there. So thank you so much for supporting the show, my friend. A couple of the comments that have come through. Jasmine commented, the ocean has always made me feel uneasy, Wixie. And it's funny that someone said the other day, we've mapped more parts of Mars and the moon than we have our own planet. So there's less of the depths of our own planet, the oceans, that have been mapped and explored in terms of topographically, is that the word? Not sure. Then Mars and the moon. We so there is so much more to explore in the depths of our oceans than I mean, look at the Mariana Trench, how deep that is, and that's what James Cameron got down to in his incredible submersible. He was down there for quite some time, and the amount of pressure. If there was if it was compromised, he's gone in a split second. So yeah, we know very, very little about the oceans on this mortal coil of ours. Some of the other comments that have come through, Starfish Troopers podcast, some of the oldest reports are from ships. Yeah, very true. There are some, and Tim Galladay is definitely, I'm really pleased to see him engaged on this topic because he brings that level of domain expertise to the conversation. So it's great to have folks like him in the conversation. Yes, Mindful, good call. So Richard Dolan's book on USOs is coming out shortly, I believe. I know he's been working quite hard on that for some time. And I know Darcy Weir's done a documentary that came out only recently on USOs as well. So that will be an interesting one. Telekinetic, If an Aboriginal elder fronted the Pine Gap front gates claiming the site is sacred, perhaps ancestors buried there, and demand entrance, would they have a legal case to gain entry? Good question. I don't know much about the law on that front, but it would be great to have an Aboriginal elder that was interested in UAP. We could maybe get them to rock up and try and talk their way in. Who knows? Thank you, Jimmy. I really appreciate your support as always, my friend, and all of your wealth of research that you send my way. Have a wonderful weekend, Easter weekend, Akashi, Chris, you and your family and friends. I hope you have a wonderful weekend with Stewie. So yes, and The Abyss is a really wonderful film with what do they call them? NTIs. Was it NTI? I can't remember the not NHI, but they use something similar. So James Cameron, The Abyss. If you're an 80s child, you know that movie back to front. If you don't, I would encourage you to give it a look. See, it is a very, very cool movie. Last thing I wanted to show, share with you folks as we wrap up. And again, I've bloody done it again. I'm getting up to that 2.5 hour mark. I just want to share with you a tweet that I put out on X only a day or two ago. When was it? It was the 26th, only 2 days ago. It is about Australia's most famous, renowned cold case, the Westall incident. So mark your calendar, because on the 6th of April, this is Saturday the 6th of April at 6 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Saving Time, Drew Lane, who is the director, the creator of the Westall 66 musical, which was a school production, primary school production. So it's not, don't obviously expect Broadway and anything like that. But it premiered in Melbourne. I unfortunately didn't have an opportunity to attend it, so I'm really, really looking forward to watching the recording. It's a one-time screening, so it's not going to air again. It's just a one-time event. So if you're interested to watch that, just jump on over to, I don't think I put the link in the description below. I haven't, but if you jump on I'll put it in the description below after this live stream. But if you want to jump on my Twitter, you'll see it's one of the first few things. For those of you that aren't familiar with the Westall incident, I had an opportunity to meet with a small number of primary witnesses in April of last year. So 6th of April, 1966, several hundred school children and a number of teachers observed between 1 and 3 what they described as flying saucers in the sky above their school, Westall High School, around mid-morning recess time, 10:20 a.m. And one of the flying saucers was seen to make its way to a densely wooded area about 1K or just shy of a mile south of the school, and it was reported to have descended or touched down with the ground. A really fascinating case. What's so frustrating 58 years later is that there's never been any official government explanation at a federal government level, state, local level, as to what can be attributed to the Westall incident, what it was, what it wasn't. So it's one of those mysterious, unresolved cold cases 58 years later that frustrates so many researchers like myself and Shane Ryan, who's been the lead researcher on Westall for so long, Ross Coulthart, Bill Chalker, Keith Basterfield. These guys have been at this for so much longer than I have, and no one is able to come up with any documentary evidence pertaining to the Westall incident and what happened. If you're not too sure what I'm talking about, this is a brief preview that I put together. It's a recreation. There is some creative license added just to kind of hit home the telling of the events on the day. But if you're interested to watch the documentary, I'll show you how you can do that in just a moment. So enjoy this brief trailer of the documentary I did last year called The Westall Witnesses, and I'll play it for you now briefly.
Westall High School, Wednesday the 6th of April, 1966. What starts out as an ordinary second last day of term quickly transforms into an extraordinary event, leaving an indelible mark on the lives and young impressionable minds of many forever. At approximately 10:15 a.m., while participating in their morning PE class, a number of students are left dazed and confused at the sight of a strange object hovering in the sky over the southern end of the school. Its shape, that of a classic flying saucer. Moments later, a science class filled with students attent of their teacher's lesson is interrupted unexpectedly with a stunning revelation.
Mr. Greenwood, there's a flying saucer.
Huh? A chaotic commotion quickly ensues. The ringing of the school recess bell at 10:20 a.m. leads to a mass exodus of unruly students onto the sports oval outside. There, several hundred students are left in shock and awe as the flying saucer finds their gaze. Some students remain calm and curious. Most do not. The flying saucer motions towards the signature power pylon at the southwestern corner of the school and emits a low-level hum as it hovers above it. Students continue to watch on in both shock and awe as the flying saucer exhibits flight characteristics that defy the known laws of physics. With no visible signs of propulsion, the flying saucer suddenly takes off at a high rate of speed. A small number of fearless students race towards the school's boundary fence in pursuit of the craft, as it moves in a southerly approach to a densely populated wooded area known as the Grange, a location known only too well by school students thanks to their grueling cross-country runs. Moments later, a worker going about his morning rounds of harvesting carrots in the adjacent market garden is confronted by the unknown object. It hovers effortlessly above the tree line and emits no sound. The flying saucer begins to disappear from the market gardener's line of sight as it descends in an arc towards the southeastern corner of the Grange. At the adjoining 8th hole of the Spring Valley Golf Club, a number of golfers going about their morning round are left flummoxed and speechless at the sight of the flying object as it dips beneath several trees that line the edge of the fairway. Suddenly, a high school girl that gave lead chase towards the Grange discovers the flying saucer on the ground, or hovering just above it. Just as soon as she begins her cautious approach, the flying saucer instantaneously accelerates to the sky above. It's gone. All that remains of its presence, a perfectly symmetrical imprint in the flattened grass.
So that's the trailer, folks, or a preview. I guess it's a recreation. If you are interested to have a look at the documentary that I put together, The Westall Witnesses, feel free to do so at your leisure. It is on my channel. If you follow me on X, it's my pinned post on my profile. So if you just go to my handle, which is just @GrantLavac on X, that will pop up for you. It's one of the first posts you'll see on my account. So you can have a look at that on YouTube if you wish, if you wish to search for it that way. Yeah, it's such a truly fascinating case, and still so many questions, so few answers 58 years after it happened, and some good comments there from 12CM32. People from the armed forces don't normally go to schools to say nothing happened. Yes, there was reports of the children were told to shut up about it. They were told not to talk about it, say that they saw anything. If it was so prosaic, why would you be told to shut up about it? It just boggles the mind. So look, I really appreciate all the time that you've given me this evening, folks, this morning, if you're across the pond. Want to wish you and your families a wonderful, happy Easter. I look forward to seeing you on a future episode of the Unexplained Rundown. And thank you so very much once again for taking some time out of your day. Bye for now.
If you have enjoyed this episode of the Unexplained Rundown, please consider giving it a thumbs up, sharing with your friends, family, colleagues, and social network, as well as subscribing to the channel. And if you'd like to be notified whenever the Unexplained Rundown goes live, premieres, or posts a new video, be sure to ring that cowbell.